12/22 3245 asked a very interesting question. Do you have or know of any excerpts or lectures where he, Neville Goddard, gives specifics about creating stronger assumptions, tips to sustain them, and tips to sustaining longer attention? Generally speaking, throughout Neville's various lectures, it simply comes down to practice. Neville would compare it to, say, a concert pianist, that every day the pianist will practice. And Neville would talk about just using it as a way of life, from the small things to the big things, and especially at night, looking over your entire day, and if there is anything unlovely, to revise it. Revise it as many times as needed until it takes on the tones of reality. And you feel you have moved. There's some change. You don't see things the same way. Your mood has changed. But more specifically, here are several different exercises Neville gave in various lectures as well as in one of his books. My old friend Abdullah gave me this exercise. Every day, I would sit in my living room where I could not see the telephone in the hall. With my eyes closed, I would assume I was in the chair by the phone. Then I would feel myself back in the living room. This I did over and over again, as I discovered the feeling of changing motion. This exercise was very helpful to me. If you try it, you will discover you become very loose with this exercise. Practice the art of motion, and one day you will discover that by the very act of imagining, you are detached from your physical body and placed exactly where you are imagining yourself to be, so much so that you are seen by those who are there. From The Secret of Prayer Lecture, 1967. Here is another exercise that I have found very helpful. At home, where I know what every part of a given room looks like, I sit in a chair facing one wall, and with my eyes closed, I look ahead and see not the wall that is in front of me, but the one that is behind me. I see that wall in my mind's eye, and it is now in front of me. Then the room has reversed itself, or I have reversed myself. Throughout the whole Bible, there is this tone of reversibility. I discovered as I read it that it means this: so I see what is behind me as if it were in front of me. Here is another exercise. I would sit physically in my living room in New York City and assume that I was actually standing on the street in front of my apartment house. And standing there on the street, I would see every detail on the marquee of the building. Physically, I was in my living room on the 16th floor, but in my imagination, I was on the street and I was seeing it. Then, in imagination, I would walk back into the building, come upstairs, and sit down where ESO was. And the next time, I actually did go out and took ESO. When I reached the street and looked at the marquee, I saw on it what I had not noticed the last time I looked at it physically. From Esau and Jacob Lecture, 1959. Now, about a week ago, I suggested a certain technique that I learned from my old friend Abdullah. Sitting physically in one place and assuming that I am physically seated in another place. And I go from place to place. After a while, it becomes so easy, and then you can open your eyes at the place where physically you really are not, and when you do so, you open that eye with a shock. If I am seated in a big chair in my living room, and imagine I'm seated in the bedroom, when I want the shock, I open my eye while I am imagining I'm seated in the bedroom. If I open my eye when I imagine I'm seated in the living room where the body was in the beginning, there's no shock. But there's a shock to open your eyes where the body is not, because it seems so real to you. And this is how you exercise this talent. From The Secret of the Sperm Lecture. And a final exercise. To aid in mastering the control of your attention, practice this exercise. Night after night, just before you drift off to sleep, strive to hold your attention on the activities of the day in reverse order. Focus your attention on the last thing you did, that is, getting into bed, and then move it backwards in time over the events until you reach the first event of the day, getting out of the bed. This is no easy exercise, but just as specific exercises greatly help in developing specific muscles, this will greatly help in developing the muscle of your attention. Your attention must be developed, controlled, and concentrated in order to change your concept of yourself successfully and thereby change your future. Imagination is able to do anything, but only according to the internal direction of your attention. If you persist night after night, sooner or later you will awaken in yourself a center of power and become conscious of your greater self, the real you. Attention is developed by repeated exercise or habit. Through habit, an action becomes easier, and so, in course of time, give rise to a facility or faculty which can then be put to higher uses. When you attain control of the internal direction of your attention, you will no longer stand in shallow water, but will launch out into the deep of life. You will walk in the assumption of the wish fulfilled as on a foundation more solid even than earth. From the book, The Power of Awareness, Chapter 6, Neville Goddard.